Hello there, and welcome to Merry Wednesday, a weekly podcast where every day is a holiday. I'm Sam, and I'm here to help you celebrate. And today, that means getting your feet off the ground, your head in the clouds, reaching for the stars, or whatever other space-related idiom and/or cliche you prefer, because today, April 12th, 2023, is International Day of Human Spaceflight. If you've listened to the previous episodes, you should probably have just tuned out the word international with the understanding that, generally speaking, that word in front of these holidays is just for flair. A holiday isn't truly an international holiday unless it is approved through a vote in the United Nations. But guess what? That actually is the case for this one. Today was declared officially the International Day of Human Spaceflight by a resolution of the General Assembly at the United Nations on April 12, 2011, the 50th anniversary of the first human spaceflight. That flight was completed on April 12, 1961, by Soviet citizen Yuri Gagarin. As the United Nations website states, the General Assembly expressed its deep conviction of the common interest of mankind in promoting and expanding the exploration and use of outer space as the province of all mankind, for peaceful purposes and in continuing efforts to extend to all states the benefits derived therefrom. How boring does that make space travel sound? Maybe that's why, despite this being a holiday for apparently 12 years now, I've never heard of it before. Have you? And I was such a space nut as a kid, so I'm kind of bummed out at how dry this makes it sound. So let me get into some basic history first, but then let's make things a bit more interesting. Yuri Gagarin was originally in the Soviet Air Force and was chosen in a nationwide selection process in the Soviet Union as one of 20 candidates to be the first human to go into space. As the numbers were narrowed down, he became one of the Sochi Six, a group of 6 people subjected to elite training as well as tests of physical and psychological endurance. Eventually, all but 3 of the original group of 20 voted for him to be the one to go. Interestingly, one of the factors that helped him get chosen was actually his height. There was limited space in the vessel, and he was quite short at only 1.57 meters. Or, for my fellow Americans who can't think in meters and who need to Google what that is in imperial measurements, that's just under 5'2". So if you're ever feeling like your short stature is keeping you from attaining greatness, just remember Yuri Gagarin. And to put things into perspective, that actually makes him a few inches shorter than Napoleon Bonaparte, who was about 5'5". Anyway, Gagarin took flight from Moscow on April 12, 1961, in a vessel called Vostok 1, and completed one orbit around Earth in less than an hour and a half. Now, I don't know about you, but I've spent more time than that traveling to get brunch. So the idea of circling the entire planet that quickly is almost completely incomprehensible to me. Especially when you think about how space travel is portrayed on TV and movies, because it looks like the takeoff is very explosive and then the actual traveling is comparatively pretty slow. But let me put it into perspective for you. The average speed of a commercial airplane is between 550 and 600 miles per hour. Yuri Gagarin was traveling at 17,500 miles per hour. That is more than 29 times faster. So it would take a commercial airline almost 2 days to go the same distance, assuming it didn't have to stop to refuel at all, or climb the 187 miles above Earth as opposed to its usual cruising altitude of about 36,000 feet. Obviously, it would require the plane going fast enough to exit the atmosphere, which it does not have the capability to do since, it's not a rocket ship, but I digress. Main point, that is bonkers. But the UN website talking about this holiday didn't actually get into the details of the flight. It just sort of mentioned it's to celebrate the anniversary. What it really gets into is the Voyager Golden Record. And the person hosting the video about it on the website is none other than Bill Nye the Science Guy, CEO of the Planetary Society, which I'll touch on more in a bit, and childhood educational icon to my fellow millennials. The Golden Record is a 12-inch copper record plated in gold intended to be played on a record player for any extraterrestrial beings who may come across it in the future. Copies were attached to the twin Voyager crafts launched in 1977, and engraved onto it are instructions on how to play the record and how to find Earth. Now, I've never personally played a record in a record player before, and if that shocks or offends you, I do know what cassettes and VHSs are if that helps. But even with all the written instructions explaining the purpose behind each picture, I don't think I could ever personally figure it out. One would hope that any being who discovered this would have some knowledge of rocket science, so here's hoping that they would understand it, but I am decidedly not a rocket scientist. So what's on this record? Well, the purpose of it is to provide friendly greetings in several languages, as well as some sounds from Earth, all after a brief message from the United Nations Secretary General at the time, basically to serve as a record for the future that we were here. It's a very nice idea, but in my opinion, the execution is bizarre. Since this is the future now, you can actually find the audio from the golden record rather easily. The links to Apple Music and Spotify are in the show notes. Maybe it sounds less awkward on the actual record, but at this particular juncture, I can't think of anything stranger to listen to while driving my toddler to swim lessons, which is exactly what I did. After the initial message, it switches to greetings in 55 languages. But then it gets really weird. The greetings are followed by more greetings, only this time from the United Nations, and whales. Yes, whales. Just listening to it got so long and thanks for all the fish stuck in my head. And if that song is now stuck in your head, I'm very sorry. But I also have a lot of respect for you for knowing it. After that, it's just an assortment of noises labeled the sounds of Earth. It's a few thunderstorms, the sounds of a saw and hammer, some animal noises, a baby crying. It feels like a kid playing with a sound machine. In theory, there are also pictures on the record, which is confusing since my understanding of records is that they're just audio. And there's also some music, but I didn't see those on Apple Music or Spotify. But there are links in the show notes if you're interested in looking at the pictures or finding the track list for the music. So how do we celebrate a day dedicated to human spaceflight? Fly to space, obviously. Come on, go, jump, get in your rocket and take off. But really, start by looking up. There are a couple of really cool space-related events coming up that you can plan for. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, there are 2 solar eclipses coming up this year, the first of which is next week. Obligatory public service announcement: if you're going to watch a solar eclipse, please don't look directly into the sun. Just never look directly into the sun. Good habit to have. Gotta keep those beautiful eyes of yours nice and functional. There's a little device that you can make to view the eclipse and protect your eyes, so I've included a link with instructions in the show notes if you're interested in that. Also next week is the beginning of the Lyrid meteor shower. Do a quick search on your location and find the best time and area to see the most meteors or shooting stars. And if you just can't wait, you can always go to a planetarium or a science museum and see something right now. But in the meantime, there are lots of movies and TV shows about space travel that you can watch. I could list some, but there are just so many. Movies about space literally go back to the silent film era. Happy to know what your favorite is, and if you'd like to suggest one though. Or you can read a book about space travel, either fiction or nonfiction as you prefer. Also, apparently moon shoes still exist, or exist again, so that's pretty neat. But I have to say, as odd of a celebration as it sounds, especially coming from someone who, in general, is not a very big fan of studying history, my best recommendation would be to start looking into the history and the future of space exploration. It is absolutely fascinating. When you think of space-related organizations, you probably just think of NASA or SpaceX, but there are so many more. The Planetary Society I mentioned earlier states that their vision is to know the cosmos and our place in it, and that their mission is to empower the world's citizens to advance space science and exploration. There is also the SETI Institute, which, as the acronym suggests, focuses on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Obviously, they haven't found anything yet, or we'd probably know about it, but I'm excited to learn more about what they do in the future. Another thing to look into is the International Space Station. It's a whole research and living facility orbiting Earth at an altitude of approximately 250 miles. Construction of the International Space Station began in 1998 and was completed in 2011. If you're paying close attention, you may have noticed that that was the same year that this holiday was declared. But people have actually been living on the station since the year 2000. According to the NASA website, by the end of October 2020, 240 people from 19 countries have been on the International Space Station. More than 2,800 experiments have been conducted in space. I mean, how cool is that? It can house up to 6 people at a time. The purpose of the station is to do research that could not be done on Earth. For example, it would be a bit difficult to study how a person is affected by living in space without, living in space. The goal here is to learn more about space and study how to explore it even further. And since the space station was built by and is operated by many different nations, it's a fantastic example of international cooperation being used to work towards the common goal of bettering mankind. So even if you don't care about all this space stuff, I feel like that should be enough to give you some faith in humanity in the future. And speaking of the future, there's yet another pretty cool space-related event coming up. As of the time of this episode, there have been a total of 12 people who have walked on the moon. All of these people are men. But next year, NASA's Artemis mission intends to land the first woman and person of color on the moon. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if that's one person or two based on the way it's written, but we'll find out eventually. This is huge since humans haven't been to the moon since 1972, so the technology has probably improved just a little bit since then. And one of the major goals with this is to help prepare to land humans on Mars someday. So there's so much more to do and discover out in space, and we get to watch mankind continue to progress. Who knows where we'll be in another 50 years? Hopefully not just going back to the moon again, but I guess we'll see. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this extremely science-based episode. Certainly a bit of a change from pizza. I hope it didn't cause you to space out. Yes, I have been trying to figure out a place to fit that pun this whole episode. If you have any additional insight on human spaceflight, or if you have any other suggestions for how to celebrate, please feel free to send me an email at merrywednesdaypod@gmail.com. You can also check out www.merrywednesday.com, find our page on Facebook called Merry Wednesday, follow our Instagram page at Merry_Wednesday, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Merry Wednesday. And if you liked this episode, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. Thank you so much for taking the time to celebrate with me, and I hope you have a very Merry Wednesday.